Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, December 19th, 2014, the WNW 171. My big story, the economy. And I think both the Fed and Congress made a couple of big moves that tips off what they really think about the economy, that it's not good, and it's going to get worse, and it could be a calamity in the making. Let's start with what the Federal Reserve did this week. You know, this week the Federal Reserve came out, even though in published reports in this newspaper, just like here in USA Today, they say the economy is surging. I believe that's the words they use. And here we have the new buzzword right here, patient. That they're going to be patient. That the Federal Reserve chairman and the Federal Reserve came out and said, about our loose monetary policies and raising interest rates, that they're going to be patient. Really? You're going to be patient? I mean, not that many months ago, they were talking about, the middle of 2015, they're going to be raising interest rates. Now they come out at the end of the year and say they're going to be patient? I mean, if we really did have a surging economy, if we really did have a so-called recovery, wouldn't they be taking their foot off the gas? If you were coming out of the ditch, you were spinning your tires and coming out of the ditch, when you got up out of the ditch, wouldn't you let off the pedal? Would you keep flooring it? But if you were in the ditch and you couldn't get out and you were sinking, and if you took your foot off the gas, you go right down the hill. I think they're scared to death, and they know that the economy is not good. Listen, if we had a good economy, I keep coming back to these big sweeping, things. Would we have 93 million people no longer counted in the workforce? Would we have nearly 50 million people on food stamps? Paul Craig Roberts, the former assistant Treasury Secretary, came out and said, they just had a Fed study that said nearly 50% of 20-somethings were living at home. They don't have enough money for rent, let alone a house. What does that do to the housing market? We don't have a good economy. And the Federal Reserve has hundreds of economists that know a heck of a lot more than I know. They know that. And so when they come out and say, we're going to be patient, and then why would Janet Yellen come out and say, we're going to keep, the Fed, they say we're going to, keep this loose monetary policy for a considerable time. To me, that means that, forget about raising interest rates in mid-2015. We're not going to do it for the whole year. And do you really think the Fed is going to start jacking up interest rates in an election year 2016? There wouldn't be a Democrat left in the House or the Senate. The economy would be non-existent. The federal budget deficit, what we owe, would balloon if we had to pay higher interest payments. It's unbelievable. I think also the Federal Reserve was afraid about the Christmas spending numbers. And when it comes out, when the dust settles, after the first quarter or so, or not long into the new year, and we find out the Christmas buying season wasn't so good. I think they were afraid to say anything but, wow, things are great. What did you see? The stock market shoot up hundreds of points. Things aren't great. If they were great, they would knock this off. If they were great, they would raise interest rates beyond 0%. If they were great, they'd stop the money printing. They'd tighten monetary policy. They can't tighten monetary policy because the whole thing will blow sky high. The Fed has painted themselves into a corner. People ought to be terrified for what's coming, and I think the Fed's overt announcement about being patient and keeping their easy money policies for a considerable time, that should be terrifying, not something to be celebrated. Second big reveal, the big warning, flashing red light, is Congress the week before last, not last week, right at the end of last week, Saturday. They had a debate in the Senate floor about gutting the financial regulations of Dodd-Frank, where, the one good thing they had with Dodd-Frank was something called the push-out. They couldn't, they had to push their derivative business outside the bank to a subsidiary. They could not use depositors' money, and therefore depositors nor the FDIC would be on the hook. But they changed that. John Boehner allowed a provision to gut that, and it was a provision that was put forth by Citigroup and J.P. Morgan. Now, why in the world would they be pushing that? Well, things are bad when a story like this bubbles out in the mainstream press. And it's not really the full story. It talks about junk bond funds, but they're talking about, the price of oil, causing these bonds to go, to get hammered. Especially these junk, but they're not just junk bonds. These are shale bonds and energy bonds and derivatives. And, they had to be at a certain price point for the bond to have value. And, that was 70 or 80 bucks, a barrel for oil. And now we're in the, the low 60s and 50s and could go lower. And what does that do to the bonds? Just like the mortgage-backed securities. Houses back up those bonds, except there's no money. They're all debt. The houses, they owe money, a 100% debt on the houses. There's no equity there. Same thing with these, these derivatives and shale bonds. And the leverage in the shale business and the oil business, especially the shale business, is unbelievable. It's extreme. This is going to be a replay of the 2008 financial calamity all over again. And yes, it will affect all stratifications of credit. Just like the subprime is going to be contained, this won't be contained to the shale market. Why else would you big bankers, be frantically sticking this into a financial bill, a spending bill, that basically impairs depositors and taxpayers and guts any kind of protection they had. Any kind of protection they had whatsoever. And it's a bizarre turn of events when, the progressive social liberal Elizabeth Warren votes the exact same way as Tea Party favorite and, free market and freedom guy, liberty, Ted Cruz, those two vote the same way. On what planet are you living when Ted Cruz and Elizabeth Warren, a Democrat, Elizabeth Warren, and a Republican, a Tea Party Republican, Ted Cruz, both vote the same way in the Senate to try to stop this provision to be in the spending bill? And I got to tell you that there were about 40 Republican and Democratic about 20 Democrats and about 20 Republicans. It wasn't exactly that, but fairly evenly split in the Senate who voted no, but it wasn't enough. And them sticking that in this spending bill, to me, is ominous in terms of why would you want that if the economy was surging and things were great and more people were going back to work and spending was up? Why would you be afraid of a derivatives meltdown and the banks going out of business? That's what we're talking about here, because they almost went out of business if it were not for the massive amount of money printing stuck into these banks and TARP and the Fed buying all these toxic assets from them. They would have been absolutely out of business. They would have been imploded. Why are they doing that again? I think that is a big, ominous tell on the part of Congress that they were willing to make members of their own party, both Democrats and Republicans, fuming over passing this with that little addendum in the legislation for spending. Unbelievable. Well, gasoline prices being down, oil prices being down, are great for people filling up their tanks. I love it. I would love it as long as you can, because I don't think it's going to last for years and years into the future. But this is great for U.S. drivers, but it's bad for those derivatives and those bonds and the shale industry in the U.S. It's very bad for Russia. They say that they're really dependent on oil prices, and part of the reason why the ruble has been cut in half in buying power is in part because there's this glut of oil. Now let's go down to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is not going to cut their oil production. They want to punish Russia. They probably want to punish Iran. They don't like them either, and they probably want to kill our shale business. About the only business in America that we actually had a bright spot, but you need 80, 90, $100 a barrel for that to work, and the bonds to stay solvent. But part of what's happening, I want to get back to Russia, because part of what's happening is that Russia is under attack from the U.S. That much is clear, especially, and this is the USA Today again, especially when it comes out in the USA Today, U.S. aims punch at reeling Russia. And Russia says about 25% of its problems are because of the U.S. sanctions and this financial warfare that's being put on Russia. And these sanctions, we just ready new sanctions to put on Russia. And we also, the U.S. Congress, House and Senate, voted to send lethal aid to Ukraine. I mean, weapons, war, more war. Well, the lethal aid may be lethal to the Ukrainians and maybe to the U.S. Vladimir Putin gave a speech, and essentially he said, hey, the Russian bear, not going to roll over. Not going to happen. And these sanctions are hurting Europe, which is reeling, and the countries are packed full of debt and insolvent banks. Russia doesn't have much debt. They actually, I think, have a surplus. But, these sanctions are hurting Europe a whole lot more, I think, than they're hurting Russia. I don't think Russia's going to go bankrupt. I think many countries in Europe could go bankrupt. And I don't mean just the pigs, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Spain, Greece. France has a lot of debt in their banks. Germany is having major contraction of industry. They are big business partners with Russia. This is terrible. And now we're going to send lethal aid to Ukraine, more war. And that's only getting ratcheted up. That's not on the front page, but that's getting ratcheted up. And not only that, but speaking of war, let's talk about the Islamic State in eastern Syria and western Iraq. And remember, not that many months ago, President Obama came out and said we're going to have an air campaign and no boots on the ground, no boots. Well, boots, yes, we've already sent boots. I think about 3,000. And I think we're going to be sending much more because outgoing Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel is planning and looking into how that the Iraqi military is going to retake Mosul in western Iraq. And that's not going to happen with the moderate, so-called moderate rebels that hand the equipment we give them to the Islamic State or the Iraqi army. They can't do it. So it's going to have to be not just, I'm going to have Americans going into battle with the Iraqis, with the Iraqi government. And that's going to entail more boots and more war. And there's so many ways for the situation in Ukraine to go sour and sideways. And there's so many ways for the situation, in Iraq and Syria to go sideways. The box of black swans is full to the brim, waiting for somebody to tear open the box. Finally, I don't have much on the internet attack of Sony. I mean, I don't care. I don't really care about whether the studio execs think, Angela Jolie is a few bubbles off. I don't care if they said tawdry things about the president. I don't care. What I do care about is that this exposes American businesses, and this could be a part of financial warfare back on the U.S. Here we have this big movie, The Interview, that was on, Kim Jong-un, and, they suspect they may have a hand in it. They don't know. It's not proven. But they have this movie, and they've been threatened by, they were hacked, Sony. They've been threatened. The movie theaters have been threatened. And so instead of having a movie and have a $20, $30, $40 million weekend and keep people employed in the movie industry in Hollywood, that movie, poof, no. Not anytime soon, anyway. And it makes me wonder about what other businesses can be hacked. And terrorists can commit financial crimes and warfare and ruin their business. Walmart, could it be Target? Could it be General Motors? Could it be ExxonMobil, Shell? Could it be, Chevron? Could it, what other company? The military is probably fairly safe. But many U.S. businesses, I mean, if you have sophisticated hackers going in and people on the inside that are sellouts that can be bribed, this could wreck American businesses. Really could. It could cause more financial calamity in an economy, as I've laid out, isn't so hot to begin with. And finally, I want to talk to you about these new relations, reopening relations with Cuba. And I only want to talk about the two senators in the Senate that have a Cuban heritage. Both their parents were from Cuba and left Cuba. And we're talking about Robert Menendez, the Democrat from New Jersey, and Marco Rubio. Let's start with just the Democrat, Menendez. And incidentally, I want to tell you that, remember I told you that Democrats were going to start, fighting back against Obama and railing against Obama? Menendez said that, the Democrat says that, this new relationship, normalizing relations with Cuba, vindicates the brutal behavior of the Cuban government. That's his quote. Vindicates, woo. I mean, there have been op-ed pieces in the Washington Post, very negative on President Obama. That's hardly a bastion of right-wing conservative journalism. Also, the Republican, Marco Rubio, and he just came out and said Obama betrayed, said it twice, betrayed Cubans fighting for freedom. This is a bad deal. We got nothing for it. Even Raul Castro was on the air in Cuba saying, well, we didn't have to give up anything. I mean, they gave up a spy and some social worker or some innocent American. But, we gave up, we normalized relations. We gave up people who were convicted of espionage and murder against the United States. And, just a bad deal. And the president, I got to say this, can do what he did, according to legal scholars. He does have the ability to open up relations with countries. Judge Napolitano is the legal scholar I'm talking about. He can't stop the embargo. He can't reverse the embargo. That's a congressional thing. But he can do what he's doing. And I just don't think it was a good deal. And according to Rubio and Menendez, they don't think it was a good deal either for a variety of reasons. Now, some people speculate that the president is doing this because they want to break up, cozy relationships between, Russia and Cuba. And maybe Russia one day may want to put a military base, a naval base in Cuba. Who knows? But I do know this is a bad idea, and we gave up a lot and didn't get anything, and the Cubans and the rest of the world are laughing at this president. And incidentally, I told you the theme about there are going to be Democrats voting against the president. Well, what happened in the Senate with and I just want to go back, digress here. What happened in the Senate when they voted against this spending bill because of the Wall Street's able to use depositors' money and gamble with derivatives? What happened? About 20 Democrats, including Elizabeth Warren, voted against the president? That's what I predicted, and expect more Democratic votes against President Obama's policies. And what is Chuck Schumer going to do when they try to fix certain things in the Obamacare bill? Like the employer mandate that is a job killer. You think Schumer's going to vote no? A Democrat from New York? Yeah. It's going to be a wild couple of years for politics and the economy. Hold on to your hats, folks. It's going to be tough. I really appreciate all the comments to the site. Got a lot of comments on Harry Dent. One of the first times I can remember that on the YouTube channel that at one point there were more thumbs down than thumbs up on the interview, but it spurred hundreds and hundreds of comments. Some people agreed. Some people liked the other side of the issue and a different perspective. Other people, lots of other people, didn't like what he had to say. I thank Harry Dent for coming on and giving us his perspective. But listen, thank you all for your comments, both negative and positive. I want to tell you that. Thank you for those of you who help us with donations. It does help us. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Here comes the best part. Merry Christmas, and fear not.